Well, I've pretty much already started, and what I've done is started processing my tomatoes. Now, what I'm going to do today is basically a really simple tomato sauce that you can can, and then a really simple tomato sauce that you can can, and then when you use it later, you can doctor it up however you want. I'm going to add some basil, some oregano, and some thyme from the garden here. That's what I'm picking right now. And what I've also done is I've processed a bunch of tomatoes already. Now, the most important thing with canning is to make sure all of your jars, your lids, your rings, your utensils are all sterile. Because anything that gets on these rims can break the seal, which means it won't stay preserved. They've been doing canning since long before we had refrigeration and freezing. And there's one book that I always go to for canning, and that is the Ball. Well, they call it the Blue Book, but I got the little advanced book, and it's got a whole bunch of recipes and techniques for just about everything, from preserves to fruit to meat to anything you want. So what I'm doing now is I'm pulling these jars out of here that I've been sterilizing. This is very hot, so be careful when you're doing it. I've already burnt myself a few times today. And with the tomatoes, what I've done is I've cut them, I took the top off, took the core out, cut off any ugly parts, and processed them in a Ninja blender here. Just basically made a sauce out of it. Now, I personally do not take out all the seeds and stuff like that. I eat tomatoes like apples. So I'm Italian. But if you want to, you can half the tomato, and you can just use a spoon and take out all the seeds and all the water out of it. The other options you can do with tomatoes. This is a magnet. It's pretty handy. The other thing you can do with tomatoes is skin them. And the best way to do that is when you're processing them, or before you process them, you get off. You take and you put some boiling water down, and you just put the tomatoes in the water, and in a few minutes, you'll see the skin will start to wrinkle. You take them out, you put them into ice bath. It's basically just ice water in a bowl. And it will, once they're cold like that, you can pull the skin right off, if you prefer them to be skinless. The process we're doing right now is called a hot bath. You can also do these with a cold bath, if you like. Oh, come on. I gotta stir these tomatoes. The way I'm doing them now, some recipes will call for you to go ahead and process your tomatoes and then add hot water. With a hot bath, you don't have to do that, because basically what you're doing is you're heating the tomatoes up, and then you're going to reduce it. The water's going to evaporate. So you're going to evaporate it sometimes by a third. Just depends on what your taste is, how thick you like it. Another option you can do, which I've done before with tomato sauce, is you can do a cornstarch slurry. And it's basically equal parts of cornstarch and water. And you mix it together with your finger, and you pour it in there in the hot liquid, and it'll thicken up the whole thing. It's a real easy way to thicken up your tomato sauce. And I'm still trying not to burn myself. Now, last year I got real lucky. A friend of mine has a huge garden. He said he had all this stuff that he wanted to get rid of because he didn't have any use for it. So I went up there, and I got like 2 5-gallon buckets of green beans and a bunch of tomatoes and peppers and all that stuff. And my business partner and I canned. That's a sample of what we canned right there. We did some salsa. That was my first attempt at salsa. It's a little watery, but it tastes good. We also made some pickled banana peppers. We got some green beans. The green beans were a little late in season, so if you try them, they might be a little fibrous, but they're good nonetheless. Now what I'm going to do with these tomatoes, and I already started processing it, just do a bunch of thyme and then some basil. I've already started processing it, is I'm going to add the herbs in while they're in the pot here, reducing. That'll just add some flavor. Actually, I was smelling the oregano and the thyme. They both smell awesome, so good job, Lindsay.
So all of the, well, most of the tomatoes that we got today are from Hubers, which is a local farm store in the area. And then probably less than a quarter of them are from our garden. But all of the herbs that we're using today is from the Sykesville Community Garden.
So what I've done is I've got a book here. If you want to take a look at it, for the Ball Book of Complete Home Preserving. It's got pickling recipes, it's got canning recipes, it's got a whole bunch of good stuff. Jellies, jams, preserves. I'm sure Debbie over at Likely Story probably has a few copies. And they have one that's not nearly as involved as this one if you're just getting into canning. I'll stir these tomatoes, which are reducing nicely.
And you wanted the samples that you brought? Did you want us to open them?
Yeah, sure. I'll open them.
So we can try some?
This is hots, almost like hots that you would get like on a sub or a sandwich. This is kind of a mild, it's not very spicy. So when you open these jars, you take the ring off. Always keep the ring. And then just use your finger and you can pop them off. That smells good.
Can you reuse all that?
You can reuse everything but these lids.
Okay.
Now they do have reusable lids that you can buy. They're very expensive. What I do is I pay attention at the beginning and the end of the season. If you go to like Big Lots, they'll have lids and rings. This is $3. At Walmart, they're like usually $8 or $9. Just keep an eyeball, when you go shopping, and you can find all that stuff. This one does not want to come off. Yeah. Now you can reuse the lids if you're just going to seal it up and put it in the refrigerator, but you can't reuse it to can something else.
And the ones I gave you guys, you can reuse those.
Oh. Oh, okay. If they haven't been
Okay.
sealed, then you can, okay.
Oh, so you can reuse them if you just use it to seal it up and put it in the
Yeah, just put it in the refrigerator.
Okay, but
Process
is that because the rubber gasket gets?
Yes. On the reusable ones, they have like a thicker rubber gasket, and that just molds to the thing, and then you can redo them. The salsa, this is my last jar of salsa I'm sharing with everybody. I made like 15. Yes, this recipe is in the book. This recipe for the banana peppers is in the book. The hots was just something, we had a lot of chili peppers, so we just came up with our own mixture. And then the green beans are in the book. Just a little bit of time and effort and you can save a lot of money. Instead of buying all your vegetables at the grocery store, if you have a garden, you process them, you have them all year long. I have a friend that does green beans and he pickles them. He'll pick them raw, put them in the jar, and then he pickles them with hot peppers. And they are out of this world. They're not even that spicy. They're just a little pickle, a little spice to them. You don't want them in a hot environment. You want them in a cool, dry place. A dark place. Obviously, if the sun's there, it's going to be hot. Other than that, those have been in my cabinet, in my kitchen, since last year, since last September.
How long can they live for unopened? Like
Years. Years.
So I guess when you open it, if it doesn't hiss and pop, don't eat it.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to judge it. Well, what'll happen is, and you'll see it when I do these, is that when you can them, you'll know the ones that seal. Because when you put them into the jar, you put them all into the jar. I got a little thing here, it tells you within a ½ inch, so you just use this and make sure it's up to there. And you put the lids on, and you just put the lids on. You don't even put the rings on, and after they cool a little bit, they'll pop. They go dink, and then you just count the dinks. And that's how you know they seal.
So, and these things that you have, is that like a kit that you bought?
Yes, I bought this kit at Southern States. It's got the jar. It's got the magnet. This funnel, which is a huge lifesaver. The first time I canned, I didn't have this, and I made a big mess. This is huge. And a little magnet that keeps you from burning yourself. All right. So we're just waiting on tomatoes to reduce.
So that's just straight up tomato, no water in that?
This is just tomato, no water at all. And you can see I didn't really blend it smooth. It's still got some chunk to it. What I like to do with this, if I want like a smoother, I like chunky tomato sauce, but not everybody does. You can always go through, you can use an immersion blender or just your regular blending and blend it smooth, and it'll be good to go.
And these get like diced up?
Yep.
Okay.
And I'll show you a trick on the basil when you're done. Does anybody else have any other questions?
What kind of liquid do you use for the peppers and the green when you?
That's basically a vinegar solution, and the recipe for that is in the book. You can use, I used white vinegar for these because this is the first time I've done banana peppers. You guys can feel free to try some if you like. I'll get some crackers out.
What was your basil trick?
Oh, I totally forgot. The basil trick is easy. You take all your leaves, you pile them up in your hand, you make like a big pile of them, and you just roll them on each other, kind of like a cigar. And then you chop them this way, and that juliennes them, makes them strips, and then you turn that, and then you can dice it.
Smart. Basil trick.
We'll put these right into the tomatoes.
Garlic, is that something that,
Yep, I'm getting ready to throw that in there.
does everybody eat garlic? Like a little bit of garlic?
Does everybody like garlic? I was going to say shame on you if you don't.
Just hopefully both people eating enjoy garlic.
Yeah.
So do you need any other assistance right now?
No, I think I'm good. I'm just waiting for these to reduce a little bit. Actually, we're real close to being ready.
Do you know how many tomatoes are in there right now? How many did you use?
Well, this bucket was full, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 tomatoes left.
Because when I went to buy them, she said you're going to want at least a bushel of tomatoes.
For this many jars?
I didn't know how many we were going to. I said we're making such. She's like you're going to want a bushel.
Yeah,
and
it's
does it
probably
matter what
close.
kind of tomato you use? 'Cause
Does
she
not
has
matter.
Canning tomatoes. She said use the canning tomatoes.
Yeah, the canning tomatoes are usually the riper tomatoes because you want a ripe tomato for canning.
Okay.
But you can use any tomato.
Can you do green tomatoes too? You can, or
I've never done them, but I'm sure you can.
maybe more like peppers, maybe.
Yeah, there's a book right there. Check it out.
What about the little tomatoes? Is that going to be too seedy to use those?
Depending on your preference, I don't think so. Like cherry tomatoes or grape tomatoes, they're sweeter. So, and I think she's got some right here.
Yeah.
You can use them.
So it's all right.
Yeah.
Like even for your salsa, would you use those in the salsa?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, depending on how you like your salsa. You know, I always encourage everybody to experiment, play with it.
Looks like you can. There's dilled green tomatoes, pickled green tomato, hot pepper mix.
That's what I was thinking. That would be really good too.
Like,
Pickled green tomatoes sounds really good.
So just fried green tomatoes.
yeah. Green tomato chutney. That sounds good.
I'm just waiting for the tomatoes to reduce.
How long does it usually take?
It can take 10, 15, 20 minutes. The longest part of it is once you get everything in the jars, and you get everything sealed, then I'm going to do what's called a water bath. And a water bath just means you're going to put everything in the jar, seal it, and I'm going to put it back in the pot, make sure it's covered with water, and then you boil it for, well, for these, you're going to do 35 or 40 minutes. Quarts, I think, are 40 or 45 minutes. And everything has its own time. Ball has gone through and done all the work for you. For instance, corn takes the longest. Corn is like a 2-day process because you have to cook the corn, and then you have to cool it, and then you can it, and then you boil it, and it's like an hour, hour and a half.
So why
That's,
boil?
it's because of the amount of starch in it. Well, basically what you're doing is you're creating a vacuum within the jar. And that's what keeps it from spoiling.
How do you know if you have a jar that you pull off your shelf and you open it and maybe it's not good? Would it be like bubbly looking inside or?
It could be discolored. The biggest indicator is that it's not hard to take that lid off. You know, if the lid just comes right off in your hand, then yeah, I'd smell it and check it before, you know, taste it a little bit, just a little bit. I did have a couple green beans that did not seal right, and what happened is they basically just rotted. So when I found them, I just dumped them out and keep the jar. If you find mason jars, keep them. If you plan on canning, I've got more than I know what to do with. Yeah, and I found some old ones too. They have them for years, for at least 100 years. Some tall, thin quarts. I found some, you know, some older quart jars that are really big, but they're thicker. You know, so if you find them, some of them are worth money too. So if you find the blue ones, they're worth money.
When you're canning, do you try to keep all your jars the same size for one thing, or do you not care? You just kinda like
Depends what I'm using them for. Tomato sauce and stuff like that, I'll stick to pints unless I have a whole lot, and then I'll use quarts. Stuff like this, I'll use the little half-pint jars, just because I'm not going to eat a quart worth of that stuff.
it's based on how much you make, how quickly you might cook it.
Yeah, and the jelly jars are, you know, they're real little. They're about, you know, real tiny little jars. I think they're half pints. You know.
So after you open them, you should eat them within.
Relatively soon. You can always put the lid back on and put it in the fridge. Just eat it within a week or so. It stays preserved as long as you keep it sealed
Right.
and in a cool, dry place.
I've got some pickles in my fridge that I open and I drink it for a year and it still tastes fine. Really?
Well, pickles, that's the weird part. Vinegar preserves everything. You know, vinegar, like these will probably never, ever go bad.
Anything that's got vinegar in there.
Yeah.
Vinegar in a canning is fine for a long.
Yeah, and if you got some old wine, keep it. It'll turn into vinegar. You just strain it.
$150 bottle of vinegar.
Yeah.
I have one of those.
The only thing I don't recommend using for canning, and that's only because the sugar content in it, would be balsamic vinegar. All right, we're just about ready. So before I do that, before I start putting the liquid in the jars here, one of the things they tell you for tomatoes, a little bit of lemon juice and salt. They say a tablespoon of lemon juice per pint. I don't want it that sour, so I put like a teaspoon. And that's
What
just
does that do?
that beefs up the acid content of the tomatoes, and it just helps preserve them a little longer.
Is that like putting sugar in to cut down on the acid?
Kind of, but in the other direction.
How do you know which jars to save?
If it says Ball Mason on it, keep it. Like
Spaghetti ones.
some of the spaghetti ones are for canning, and they'll say it on the jar usually. I save those too. And then you also need to put just a little bit of salt in there.
You don't buy the spaghetti sauce anymore. Once you learn how to
Yeah. Not unless you're in a pinch.
Are you,
Is that salt or sugar?
This is salt.
Okay.
is it kosher salt or?
It's sea salt.
Sea salt.
Does it matter?
No. In my old age, I'm not that old, but I'm old. I've tried to stay away from more refined sugars and salt and grains and stuff like that. Just personal preference. And I like kosher salt because it does not have iodine in it. So, or not kosher salt, but sea salt. And actually, I think it's just it has a better taste. It doesn't have that metal tinge. All right, that's done. And we're just about ready.
So is there anything that we could do helping you scoop it from the pot to the jar?
I don't know. I don't want anybody to get burned.
Sure, we didn't sign off the right forms.
Yeah. I don't mind if I get burned. I get burned every day. You can tell by my arms. Move this over here.
How long after you put the cans together, do you put them in the bath of the hot water right away, or can you do that?
I do it right away, because that way the whole thing, those once you sanitize the lids, it kind of makes the rubber loose on those, and I've done it. I put the lids on 20 minutes, half an hour after I pulled them out, and they've been fine. But any longer than that, then you're risking your seal.
Depending on what you're canning, the bath process time changes too, right?
Yes, it depends on what you're canning and how much of it. Like I said, that book has everything.
Just follow the recipe.
They've done the whole science. You can vary on the recipe a little bit, but
What I mean is, as far as the bath, all the recipes will tell you how long to
Yes.
do the bath part.
yes.
Are you able to seal a jar that's only half full?
I wouldn't try it, because what the book tells you, like, these are ½ inch from the top. Any other air in there, you're inviting germs and
Yeah,
stuff
stick
like
in the
that.
fridge or just
Your
have
test
a
sample.
mini jar.
Your test sample. Make sure what you can's good, is good.
Wow, I'm good. That one was perfect.
Well, we found some spoons.
All right.
Well, do any of the funnels have a little gauge on the inside of the rim? You could just,
Not that I've seen. That would be awesome.
I'll make one.
There you go.
It's too late. We have to-
So you said it's basic, so when you open it, then if you would want to add meat or mushrooms or.
Yeah.
You just add it.
Yeah, you basically saute whatever you're going to use and then add the tomato sauce to it. This is just a basic tomato sauce.
And the two buckets next to it. We got a bushel. Are any of those the yellow ones from?
No.
Okay.
No, I figured I'd save those for you. All but one jar. But at this point, I'm going to go through and check and make sure all my jars that one's there. That one needs a little. That one needs a little. So that's good that I saved a little bit, because all these jars need a little bit, except for the first one. I guess I got a little overconfident.
Okay, so you have to fill them up to a specific.
Yeah, they went within a ½ inch for tomatoes,
Okay.
and that's why this is graded down. And they've got a 1 inch, 3/4, ½ inch, and a quarter.
Oh, okay. It's the same
What,
recipe.
what changes that? The size of the jar?
Size of the jar can change it. What you're actually using. You know, what kind of liquid, how much salt content or sugar content. All right, I'm good. Yep. That was a little much, but that'll work. All right, so at this point, I got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 jars. You're gonna go ahead and put all your lids on. All of these have been sterilized. Just make sure they're centered on there good. Just Give them a little press down. See how they... Now, after I do the water bath on these and pull them out, it'll pull that right out of them.
And if you tighten it down, just hand it tight.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna tighten more on the seals.
Yeah, and actually after they're canned and after they make that pop, after they pop like that, you can take the rings off and they'll stay on.
I just like how they look with the rings on.
I've had this water boiling for a while. Be very careful doing this. You do not want to drop the jar in the water. Yeah. Yeah. I have an UGG glove.
So, and it's a fast rolling, full on boil.
Yeah, I'd say medium to medium high.
And did you screw those lids on there with that, or were you able to do that with your hand?
I did it with my hand. I mean, I held it with a rag and then screwed them on there so I didn't burn myself.
And can they be packed in there, or do they have some room to move around in the...
Most of the time, now if you buy the kit that they have a basket in it that will hold 6 or 7 depending on the size of your jar.
Okay. And change the whole basket and pull the whole basket out.
Yeah. Now, if you haven't sealed your lids properly, you'll know it very soon, especially with tomatoes, because your water will turn red or pink. Wow, I got lucky on that. Huh? There was just enough water. I didn't have to add any water to cover them.
So it's covered over the top of the jar?
Yes, you're going to cover them completely. That's why I brought this, so that if I needed to. All right,
And that's 45 minutes?
40 minutes, and I'm going to set my timer.
You have to let them cool before you store them?
Yeah, well, what'll happen is oh, that one just popped. Did you hear that? It went tink. That means it's sealed.
That means it is sealed?
Yes, that one I just put down sealed.
Yeah.
And like this one, that one just sealed.
So you'll see them go.
Yeah.
Oh,
Go-
yeah, that's little circle.
Yep.
Right here. Oh, you walked around that. That was good.
Are they done?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh.
I got into canning as a result of, well, there's a couple different reasons. One was to save a little bit of money. 2, food is my passion. And 3 would be preparedness. You know, after things like Katrina and other stuff goes on, I like to make sure that I have plenty of food available because in an event of an emergency, it's not always going to be available. Besides tomato sauce, I do peppers, green beans, vegetables, fruits. I've only been doing it for about 3 years, so I'm still learning. It's a constant process. Actually last year I did some meat, I did some rabbit, and that was really good. My favorite thing about canning is breaking out that jar and knowing that I made it and it being good. Well, canning's been around since before refrigeration. Our ancestors have been canning for centuries, whether it be through traditional canning or pickling or anything like that. Our ancestors needed to preserve food. So I think it's very important to pass that stuff along. Don't always have electricity.